You remember the quiet of a Saturday morning before the world began to vibrate with the constant, invisible hum of a billion digital notifications. The television set took a full minute to glow into life, a flickering portal that demanded you arrive on time or miss everything forever. You sat cross-legged on the carpet, watching dust motes dance in the light because there was nothing else to do but wait for the cartoon. This was the first lesson of our lives, taught not by teachers but by the ticking of the analog clock on the wood-paneled wall. We learned that the world did not bend to our immediate desires, and that the best things often required a specific kind of stillness. You could not rush the arrival of a favorite song on the radio, so you sat by the speakers with your finger poised over plastic. The physical act of waiting created a space in the mind where patience took root, deep and sturdy, before the age of the instant click. When you finally caught that melody, it felt like a hard-won victory, a treasure captured on a spinning magnetic tape that you owned completely. We were curators of the physical, gathering plastic cases and paper inserts that smelled of ink and the promise of a story yet told. Every CD in your collection was a deliberate choice, a weight in your hand that represented hours of chores or saved up allowance and focus. You didn't just listen to a song. You lived inside the album art, reading every lyric until the paper creased and the ink began to fade. There was a profound depth to our focus because we weren't being pulled away by the siren song of a different, more interesting digital infinite. We knew the exact texture of the plastic on a Blockbuster case and the specific anxiety of hoping the movie we wanted was there. If the shelf was empty, we learned to pivot, to take a chance on a grainy cover and a title we had never heard before. That uncertainty wasn't a frustration. It was an invitation to a world where not every outcome was predetermined by a 5-star rating system. We grew up in the gaps of the world, in the long silences of car rides where we stared at the passing trees for hours. Without a screen to fill the void, our minds began to wander, building cities and monsters and entire futures out of the passing gray asphalt. This was the birth of our resourcefulness, the ability to find a way to be okay when the world offered us absolutely nothing but time. You memorized the phone numbers of your 3 best friends, the digits etched into your brain like a secret code to the outside world. To reach them, you had to speak to their parents, navigating the polite waters of adult conversation before you could finally reach your peers. You told them you'd be at the park bench by the old oak at noon, and then you simply walked away. No pocket-sized glass rectangles existed to bridge the gap between that promise and the moment you finally arrived. You sat on the peeling green slats, watching the shadows of the leaves crawl across your sneakers, just waiting and trusting. If he was late, you didn't check a map. You simply sat in the stillness, learning the shape of your own patience. That silence was the foundation of accountability, a quiet agreement that your word was the only thing you truly owned. We learned that showing up was a sacred act, a physical proof that the person waiting for us actually mattered. And here's the part nobody talks about. We were the final generation to have a childhood that simply disappeared. Your most humiliating moments, the cracked voice, the failed audition, the bad breakup, were witnessed only by the trees and a few friends. They didn't live on a server in another country. They lived in the messy, fragile biological memory of the people who loved you. You could fail spectacularly on a Friday night and walk into school on Monday with the freedom to start completely over. This was our psychological sanctuary, a hidden room where we could try on identities like old clothes and then discard them. We weren't curators of a personal brand. We were just kids living in the friction of the real, unedited world. When you stepped into the woods behind your house, you vanished from the grid because the grid didn't exist yet. You were the captain of your own ship, navigating by the position of the sun and the landmarks you memorized yourself. You learned to trust the internal compass in your chest, the one that tells you when you've gone a bit too far. You'd pull the massive paper map from the dashboard, its creases worn white from 1,000 different journeys and wrong turns. Your finger would trace the veins of the highway, a physical connection between where you were and where you wanted to be. Getting lost wasn't an emergency. It was an adventure that forced you to speak to strangers and find your own way. Every time you found the right turn, you added a brick to the wall of your own resilience and quiet confidence. We were becoming the bridge, one foot in the dirt of the analog past, the other stepping into the digital future. Then the world changed, and you stood there holding the screeching receiver of a dial-up modem, the gateway to a digital frontier we were the first to settle. You watched a progress bar creep across the screen for 2 hours just to hear one song, a lesson in the high price of digital beauty. You guarded that phone line like a sentry, knowing one single incoming call from an aunt could shatter the fragile connection and reset your entire world. That agonizing wait wasn't a waste of time. It was a rewiring of your brain, teaching you that anything worth having was worth the slow, patient burn. Because access was limited, you became a curator of your own soul, choosing every track and every image with the precision of a master diamond cutter. You sat on the floor with your Discman, listening to an entire album from start to finish, honoring the artist's journey instead of just hunting for the hit. There was no skip button for the difficult parts of life, so you learned to lean into the discomfort until you found the rhythm hidden underneath. We played video games that offered no second chances, no save points, and no mercy, forcing us to master the mechanics or face the beginning again. This forged a grit in our generation that doesn't scream for attention, a quiet persistence that knows how to finish what it starts, regardless of the cost. You remember the Saturday morning ritual, the cereal milk turning blue as you gave your undivided attention to stories that only happened once a week. If you missed the moment, it was gone, and that scarcity taught you to be fully present, to drink in the details before they evaporated into memory. We went to the movies and sat in the dark for 2 hours without the glowing distraction of a screen in our palms or a notification in our ears. Our attention spans were built in that darkness, long and deep and undisturbed, a mental muscle that is becoming a rare and precious currency in the modern age. You stood in the aisles of the video store, taking a chance on a movie simply because the cover looked like a dream you wanted to have. Without 1,000 reviews to guide you, you learned to trust your own gut, to embrace the possibility of disappointment as a fair price for discovery. You survived the long, silent car rides of childhood by staring out the window and letting your imagination populate the empty fields with ghosts and heroes. Boredom was not a problem to be solved by a thumb swipe. It was the fertile soil where your most creative and resilient thoughts first began to grow. You learned how to talk to yourself, how to observe the world, and how to be alone without ever feeling the hollow ache of being lonely. We are the only ones who truly understand the weight of a physical letter and the lightning speed of an email, living comfortably in both realities. You can navigate the chaos of a broken GPS because you still remember the logic of the stars and the lines on a crumpled paper map. We are the final translators of two worlds, the only ones who remember the smell of a library card and the glow of a coding screen. We don't just use these digital tools, we understand the profound silence and the human gaps they were originally built to fill. When the Wi-Fi drops and the modern world begins to panic, you are the one who remains remarkably steady in the sudden quiet. You simply reach for the flashlight you know is in the third drawer because you still remember how to navigate your life by touch. This is your hidden superpower, the ability to think with the patience of an artisan and execute with the speed of a processor. You know that a digital like is not a conversation, and a social media post is not the same as a lasting legacy. You remember that the most transformative parts of your life happened when no one was watching, and no one was there to record it. Those private mistakes made you strong, forging a character that isn't dependent on the fleeting validation of a stranger's digital thumb. You are the bridge, steady and wide, spanning the massive gap between a tactile, physical past and an increasingly virtual, ephemeral future. While the world rushes toward the next instant fix, you still know deep in your bones the value of playing the long game. Think back to that Saturday morning on the carpet, the dust motes still dancing in that same timeless patch of golden light. The television is off now, and the world is infinitely louder, but that specific stillness of the 90s still lives deep inside you. You carry the quiet resilience of a transition generation like a secret shield against the frantic, overwhelming noise of the modern era. You are the last of the line, the final keepers of a world that existed completely and beautifully before it was ever documented. That makes your perspective vital, a necessary grounding wire for a society that has forgotten the simple, quiet art of waiting. You understand exactly what was gained, the speed, the global connection, and the endless knowledge that now sits right at our fingertips. But you also remember exactly what was lost, and you alone have the unique power to keep those human values alive today. You are not stuck between two centuries. You are the architect of the connection that allows them to finally speak to one another. So, take a deep breath, set down the device for a moment, and remember the kid sitting patiently on that sunlit carpet. You were built to endure this world, and you are more than ready for whatever world decides to come next.